Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and I am just delighted to welcome you to our final day on National Apprenticeship Week. We've had a wonderful week of sharing, programming, social media campaigns, and today we're ending with the Center of Excellence in Apprenticeship sharing about the great work that they're doing. So I am going to turn this over to Angela Baker and Amber Gallup to introduce themselves and to share about the great work they're engaged in. Angela and Amber.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Baker with Safal Partners. Safal Partners and the Center of Excellence is pleased to present today Adult Education and Registered Apprenticeship Partners on a Path to Sustainable Careers. Go ahead and share.
And as Angela is sharing that, if you want to put your name in the chat box and where you're joining us from, that would be great.
Can everyone see the presentation? Lindsay, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? I'm sorry, not Amber, I'm sorry. Can you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? And Lindsay too, no.
Hi, my name is Amber Gallup. I'm the State Director of Adult Education in New Mexico, and my area of expertise is the design of registered apprenticeship. So happy to be here.
So there was Sharon. Sharon was today's host, and thank you, Sharon, for hopping on to our webinar and introducing the session. So today's presenters will be Amber and myself speaking on the topic. Amber, you want to go over today's agenda?
Certainly. It's great to see everyone popping in and introducing themselves. Thank you. Nice to see folks. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of, topics that really are very, very much on the tips of the tongues of adult educators right now. People are asking about registered apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship. We're excited to be here to talk a little bit about what it is and how we can engage in different ways. So we'll be talking, like I say, about what registered apprenticeship is and how these programs can benefit adult learners. How can a pre-apprenticeship program prepare adult learners to successfully transition into an RA program, and how can we get engaged with that? We're also going to be identifying some new industries in which registered apprenticeship, or RA as we call it, is expanding, including IT and cybersecurity programs. And of course, we'll be discussing Safal Partners' role in that. And then we want to talk a little bit about what are some examples of the types of IT and cybersecurity jobs that are currently apprenticed in communities, and how our adult educators, our adult learners can access them.
So what is registered apprenticeship? Registered apprenticeship is the most time-tested, proven method of developing skilled talent. It's not only for the skilled trades roles, like unions and entry-level jobs. It is for businesses of all sizes, in all sectors, and any occupation that requires approximately at least a year of training to be considered proficient in that job role. For most businesses, it is a new tool that they're adding to their human capital strategy, therefore needing to establish new partnerships to recruit, train, and retrain new talent. For all registered apprenticeship programs to be effective, they must be business-driven. There are many components, and the 5 core components that I'm going to be speaking on today are the employer involvement. Again, industry and employers drive their workforce needs. There is a structured on-the-job learning or on-the-job training. It is industry validated. It's the knowledge, skills, and abilities for each occupation. And a registered apprenticeship program can be what they consider time-based, competency-based, or a hybrid model. Related instruction contains a minimum of 144 contact hours, typically includes both technical or occupational specific and soft skills that can be provided by an education or training provider like an adult education, IET program, career and technical education program, high school, and in 2- and 4-year colleges. There is a wage progression, or that rewards for skills gains. Employers decide upon these rates for apprentices, and they must be also a paid W-2 employee. And there has to be at least one pay increase during the program to encourage that retention and completion. Once apprentices complete all of the structured on-the-job learning and all of the related instruction, they will complete the program and receive a national credential. All registered apprenticeship program completers earn a USDOL certificate of completion, indicating that they are credentialed professional for their occupation. And most programs typically embed or align multiple industry valued certifications. Benefits to registered apprenticeship. So there are benefits for the employers and also benefits to the apprentices. Benefits to the employers is they're attracting this new talent. So if they have a registered apprenticeship program, 70% of workers stated that they would be extremely or very likely to switch to this new employer offering this option. There is a proven ROI. Employers report an average of $1.44 for every dollar that they invest in registered apprenticeship in that apprentice. It's highly cost effective in the long term. Diversifying their workforce. With a training plan from day one, employers can take that skills-based approach to hiring, which creates a larger, more diverse talent pipeline. Registered apprenticeship provides access and opportunity where there was once some barriers entering into these occupations. So the benefits to apprentices, it costs much less than traditional college. There is a high retention rate. So 93% of apprentices are actually completing these registered apprenticeship programs and retaining employment with these specific employers. They're getting credentials. And if you compare an individual that did not go through a registered apprenticeship to an individual that went into a registered apprenticeship, those apprentices typically earn about $300,000 more over the life of their careers than their peers. Registered apprenticeship model was refined by the building trades and labor unions over the last century, and they really made it to what it is today. It has been expanding into new industries and occupations, and there are more apprentices now across many sectors in the United States. Healthcare, for example, they're apprenticing CNAs, PCTs, CMTs, LPNs, RNs, cyber and information technology. There are many occupations that are being apprenticed in both these areas. Education, some examples are paraeducator to teacher. So they're really creating pathways within that industry to get the workforce that they need. Transportation, there are truck drivers, also in seamen, just to name a few. But it is now, because of the lack of workforce, registered apprenticeship is expanding into all of these sectors.
So thanks, Angela. And there's just a couple of points I really want to make talking about the adult education adult education programs engagement with registered apprenticeship program. So the first is what I want to reiterate what Angela said about the benefit of registered apprenticeships for apprentices. If we can help our students access registered apprenticeship programs and set them up for success within them, we've really provided good service to our students. These are beneficial jobs. Completers of RA programs, they earn more money. They have more employment stability. They have less or no education-related debt compared with workers who do not complete a registered apprenticeship program. This can really be an ideal option for our students specifically who've got barriers to employment and who are members of marginalized groups or otherwise members of groups who are non-traditional to apprenticeship. So they may need additional support to access them. And the second point I want to make is that, adult education programs can engage with registered apprenticeship in numerous ways, not only through IETs designed as pre-apprenticeships, which we are going to talk about today, but it's important to know that this can be intimidating, and there are different ways and different levels of engagement that you can consider once you identify what registered apprenticeship programs exist in your local area, right? And sky's the limit. I think Angela also mentioned the number of different types of industries that RA is expanding into. We don't have to limit ourselves to just a few. Our students, have the ability, as we know well, they have the capacity to access any of these careers in these industries. And, we don't want to limit them. So it's important to know what RA programs exist in your community and then think more broadly about ways to engage. If a pre-apprenticeship program is not going to be right for you or will take a few years to develop, which is understandable, consider other options. I recently talked to Jenny Malika of the High Road Alliance recently. I think she may actually be here on the chat right now. But she told me about ways that adult education language learners and adult education programs around the country have been engaging in registered apprenticeship in ways that is not IETs. For example, you can do workplace literacy programs, work with the RA program to provide workplace literacy programs. For example, ESL classes for workers or community-based ESL classes that include apprentices, right? So in this way, the program and the students can begin to build relationships with registered apprenticeship programs in ways that are meaningful, but maybe fall short of, a full pre-apprenticeship program. So lots of ways to engage, and hopefully some of you, when we do the Q&A section, could talk a little bit about ways that you have been engaging with registered apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's talk about one of the ways to engage with a registered apprenticeship, and that's through designing IET programs as pre-apprenticeships. So next slide, please. Okay. So all of you are likely familiar with integrated education and training, or IET model, right? So our field has access to an excellent IET design toolkit. And we also have high quality technical assistance to advance IET in our field. It's, through AIR and advanced IET. So this is really an exciting approach to facilitating access to registered apprenticeship. And that's to create an IET program that functions as a pre-apprenticeship program. However, there are a few things that can inhibit adult education programs in building IETs as pre-apprenticeships. The first is just simply awareness about the models and how to do it with access to resources, tools, and the people to support it. It really means finding ways to build on what's already been done through your IET programs, and then just connecting that with pre-apprenticeship and RA programs so that it's not just an add-on or one more thing to do. Just as an IET program is never developed by one person, building or enhancing an IET program so that it is a true pre-apprenticeship is really a team effort. Essentially the pre-apprenticeship, designing the IET as a pre-apprenticeship means that in addition to all the other things you normally have in an IET, so your academic preparation, your workforce preparation, and your workforce training, you also have an agreement with a registered apprenticeship program, an existing registered apprenticeship program, an agreement that gives your students preferred access to that registered apprenticeship program. And it also means designing it in a way that students by the end of the pre-apprenticeship are truly prepared to enter that registered apprenticeship program and succeed. Let's go through the next slide, please. Okay. So pre-apprenticeship programs are programs that help prepare people for entry into a registered apprenticeship program, simply put, right? They can provide a pipeline of candidates for the registered apprenticeship program. But unlike registered apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeships are not registered federally by the Department of Labor. You're going to want to check to make sure to see whether your state does or does not require registration. Some states do, some states don't. That really depends on your state. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, but even though there are, even though there are not federal registration for pre-apprenticeship programs, there definitely are some hallmarks of high-quality pre-apprenticeship programs out there. Let's go over a few of them. So one of them is, transparent entry and success requirements. So one thing that I always say is we need to be careful that we're not designing pre-apprenticeship programs that students don't need for entry into the registered apprenticeship program. That's one thing to note. Sometimes when I've given presentations in adult education context about apprenticeship, people say things like, well, there's this registered apprenticeship program in my area. I really want my students to be able to access it, right? So I want to be able to provide this pre-apprenticeship program. And when we actually get into what is needed to get into that apprenticeship program, their student, depending on the industry, their students may simply not need a pre-apprenticeship, right? So it's important to have that conversation with the registered apprenticeship program so that they understand, so that they can tell you what it is that they're looking for, who they're looking for, what are the things that end up tripping up applicants that you can then provide to your students to make sure that they're going to be successful. So it's important to provide that information up front. Also, in terms of transparency, it's important to note that you need to understand what some of the, the very stringent requirements are. For example, does a student need a high school diploma? Almost always with registered apprenticeship programs, you'll find that they do, right? Another thing to keep in mind is that there are work authorization requirements also, usually for registered apprenticeship programs. So it's important to be transparent with your students, those of whom, for example, may be into a process of work authorizations, but not there yet, making sure that they understand what's going to be required when they finally finish the pre-apprenticeship program. And that's really for the students, to not waste the students' time, and also to make sure that you're aligning with the requirements of the registered apprenticeship program. I think another thing to really keep in mind is that another thing I hear a lot, and I think I've heard it more in the past than I have recently, but some folks say, hey, we've got this really great pre-apprenticeship program that we're designing, and now we're trying to find an apprenticeship program for it to transition into, right? I've heard that more than one time. Please keep in mind that you can have IETs like that, but if you've got a true pre-apprenticeship program, you must have an existing relationship with an existing registered apprenticeship program. Okay. The second thing to keep in mind is that, again, you're going to want to have that clear relationship with the registered apprenticeship program so that you understand what the skills are that are necessary to be successful in that program, and then build those into your IET in the workforce preparation and the workforce training section. Remember that in registered apprenticeship programs, there is on-the-job learning. So they'll be working with a mentor on the job. Remember, registered apprenticeships are jobs. So understanding what sorts of soft skills might be necessary as well, or what sort of stackable credentials you can provide in the pre-apprenticeship so that they're better prepared for the registered apprenticeship. For example, CPR, right? Another thing to keep in mind is that it's important to have wraparound supports for our learners in particular. Research has shown that wraparound support, so for example, childcare, transportation, tutoring, and other sorts of supports are extremely important for the success of students in the populations that we serve, both in terms of completing the pre-apprenticeship IET and then transitioning into the registered apprenticeship program. To the extent that we can provide these supports, we'll be able to provide, a chance at success for our students. That's one of the biggest outcomes we've had for research in registered apprenticeship among our populations. Remember that a pre-apprenticeship should result in an industry valued credential. For example, if it's a construction-based registered apprenticeship that students are aiming for. Sometimes when you work with the registered apprenticeship sponsor, you'll be able to provide students in the pre-apprenticeship with the first year of apprenticeship or the first year of the curriculum that that they would have to do in pre-apprenticeship, taking 6 months to a year off of the time that they spend in the apprenticeship once they get there. So that's value added for the registered apprenticeship program and for the students. And then finally, of course, like I mentioned before, there should be preferred entry into the registered apprenticeship program. One thing to keep in mind, so again, it's not that, sorry, before I go on, I want to say that it's important to note that preferred entry means something, right? So what we don't want is to ask our students to go through this pre-apprenticeship process, right? And get all prepared to get in. And then at the end, there are no slots available, or there's no MOU in place so that the registered apprenticeship program knows that these students are highly qualified, prepared, and there's been an agreement that they should get preferred access or entry, an interview, and an understanding that these folks have been specifically prepared to enter that program. So that's really, really important. We don't want to leave our students out without the access that we've been promising them through the whole process, okay? So there's, of course, when you're designing these, your state will have different rules. Your state office in adult education will have different rules and regulations and policies. So it's important that we understand that these are general guidelines, but it's important to know what your state allows in terms of your IET policy. In New Mexico specifically, I'm in New Mexico, we have 3 possible outcomes for an IET program. So one of those is, an industry recognized credential. The second one is a series of stackable credentials that taken together really serve to help a student access a job in that industry or occupational group, right? And then the third option we have in New Mexico is outcome that we have in New Mexico for an IET is entrance into a registered apprenticeship program. So that in itself is the outcome. And we think that's a good way to incentivize people accessing these programs. I'll just give one quick example because I think sometimes it's hard to visualize how an IET program can be designed as a pre-apprenticeship. And I think one of the reasons I've been reflecting on this, I think one of the reasons that it is hard to get this going is because in each situation it's different. We can't give you necessarily a blueprint on how you will always be successful in designing an IET as a pre-apprenticeship because it depends so much on the local context. It depends on the sponsors of the registered apprenticeship program and the relationship that you have with them, the demand in the area and what the requirements are for entry into the RA program. So it's really a relationship-based process, and it can take a long time. But I want to give you an example quickly of one registered apprenticeship program, IET program designed as a pre-apprenticeship. There's one in Florence County, South Carolina. Their adult education program there has designed a healthcare IET that is a pre-apprenticeship. And the reason it's a pre-apprenticeship is that it prepares students to successfully enter and thrive within one of several existing registered apprenticeship programs and healthcare occupations. So in South Carolina, there are numerous apprenticeship programs in the local community, all of them in healthcare, and the pre-apprenticeship IET is helping our students get the skills and knowledge and certifications necessary to access any one of these after they complete the IET program. For example, the IET, in the IET, adult education participants, engage in contextualized academic preparation, of course, like we always do, workforce preparation, like mock interviews, resume workshops, job shadowing, and they also have the opportunity to earn multiple certifications. So for example, CPR, first aid, the bloodborne pathogen certification, and others. So this is a really great model, and it shows how, their IET program has all the components of a true IET program, as we've learned, but it also, as a pre-apprenticeship, prepares students for preferred entry into existing registered apprenticeship programs in this field. And of course, students, it's general enough that you can get enough students interested in that group of occupations, and then give them access to, you know, to any one of those, whichever one that they choose they'd like to go forward in. So that's an example of how this can work. Next slide, please. Okay. So it can really be confusing in practice, like I mentioned earlier, for adult educators to truly understand how a pre-apprenticeship IET can help students transition into the Registered Apprenticeship Program. The answer to this, like I mentioned before, is really multifaceted, and it's going to depend on the program and your partners in the local context. Next slide, please.
So in designing a registered apprenticeship program, there are entry requirements or qualifications. So all registered apprenticeship program have these excuse me, minimum qualifications listed on their program standards and their selection process. So when you talk about a pre-apprenticeship, excuse me, and how does it directly lead into a registered apprenticeship, you really have to look at that partner, their standards. What are those minimum requirements or qualifications, and how can we work back to best prepare individuals to provide them opportunity and access to these programs?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that right here, we want to talk about two key steps. So all of you should be familiar, I'm sure, if you're interested in IET or you're in adult education, with the IET design toolkit, right? And you can use that to take the next steps in partnering to develop a pre-apprenticeship program. Two key steps that I want to talk about here are as follows. So first of all, you want to ensure that the applicant meets the enrollment criteria for the RA program, you know, as Angela was just saying, right? Or that they can meet them by the end of the pre-apprenticeship IET program. So for example, when they start the IET, of course, they may not have their high school equivalency, but you know that by the end, they're going to need to have that, because otherwise they're not going to be able to access a registered apprenticeship program. So that's really important. It may also be that you've got English language goals that are needed in order to be able to, you know, communicate effectively on the job. Depending on what you're going into. For example, if it's a healthcare apprenticeship program, there's going to be, you know, possibly communication goals regarding communication with you know, colleagues and with patients and their families. So that is going to be curriculum that you can build into the registered apprenticeship to the pre-apprenticeship program. It's also important that you identify the types of supports needed to support learners' success in both the pre-apprenticeship IET program and possibly also in the registered apprenticeship program if you can. So like I mentioned before, research shows, and my own research has shown really the importance of this really crucial step of wraparound supports. So you might want to consider you know, what are the enrollment criteria in the registered apprenticeship program, like that include like, you know, required assessments or tests for entry, and what the passing score might be, right? You also might want to, you know, develop an individual learner success plan that includes elements that support learner needs, accessibility needs, and also college and career planning as appropriate. So having them get that kind of support and advising ahead of time can be really important as well. So you want to ensure that your learners have the necessary support to persist and succeed in the IET pre-apprenticeship program. And I'd also think about how to build these into their actual registered apprenticeship experience as well, if possible. And that you can make, when you're doing the planning for the IET pre-apprenticeship, you can actually you know, build that in to your agreement with the RA sponsors. So you want to consider what wraparound services are possible, right? You know, individual counseling, like I mentioned, to address the unique needs of the learners in the group. And then really, what is the plan for high quality mentoring? Mentoring is also another research-based strategy for apprentice success. And mentoring is a required part of registered apprenticeship, which again makes it perfect for our learners. But there may be an opportunity to start providing that mentoring in the pre-apprenticeship program itself. And that's something to consider as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a tool that Safal Partners has designed to help adult educators build an IET as a pre-apprenticeship program. So Safal, I'm not going to go over this entire thing, but I want just to, because there's a lot of text here, but I want to just point out a couple of things. Number one, this and more information is available at the QR code that's listed there. The second thing I want to mention is that this tool is mapped to the IET design toolkit stages. So the stages of research and assess, design and plan, and develop and implement, which many of us are already familiar with. So at each stage, there are ways to make sure that the IET that you're creating can be appropriately built to lead into the registered apprenticeship program. And by the way, I just want to mention, I'm seeing some questions pop up here at the bottom, and I'm not able to access them or, address them all right now, although I might be able to as soon as Angela starts talking here. But I will be able to, we'll be able to do a Q&A at the end as well. So just wanted to make sure people understood that. So this is just, going back to this tool, it gives steps all along the way that Safal has identified in order to make sure that you're developing a really high quality pre-apprenticeship program that's also an IET and something that we can provide to our students. Okay, next slide, please.
Thank you, Amber. So we talked about pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship. What I'm going to speak to now are how are the occupations in the United States expanding, and specifically, excuse me, in IT and cybersecurity occupations. We talked about, again, pre-apprenticeship, the role and what roles everyone can play in really building these apprenticeship ecosystems. Traditionally, the registered apprenticeship partner ecosystem included entities like unions, employers, and education providers. However, as the economy and workforce have evolved, it's crucial to expand the network of partners to effectively meet the goals of registered apprenticeship programs for businesses and for the job seekers. Successful registered apprenticeship programs thrive on collaboration among all of these partners. Today's economic landscape presents several challenges. We have low unemployment rates. So the national unemployment rate is at an all-time low as of today, which means employers are having to work harder to find talent. Increasingly diverse labor pools. Many industries need to expand beyond the current labor markets they typically use for hiring in order to bring in new skills, experiences, and capacity. They need assistance working with organizations that have relationships with diverse populations, including minorities, women, veterans, people of color, disabilities, justice-involved individuals, and refugees. They also need more worker supports. With employees facing increased challenges in the workplace related to mental health, childcare, accessing health insurance, employers are looking for organizations and partners that can provide tools, resources, and benefits to extend to their workers and apprentices. There's also a rapid technological advancements that are occurring in our country. The nature of our work is rapidly changing. The advancements in robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, it's reshaping traditional human roles and responsibilities. Employers are needing training partners to educate new hires and to even upskill their existing workforce. So when looking at this graphic, I'm not sure who is all on this webinar today. So where do you identify yourself in this ecosystem? What role could your organization play in providing access and opportunity for someone to enter into a registered apprenticeship program? You saw that intermediaries were kind of in the middle. So industry intermediaries are uniquely positioned to convene employers within an industry to determine the skill needs and workforce trends, to work with employers on a regional or national level to develop apprenticeship programs. with the goal of increasing the number of apprenticeship opportunities. Intermediaries provide industry or occupation-specific support to employers. They coordinate partner responsibilities. They provide program administration, particularly for small and medium-sized employers that may not have the capacity to operate programs on their own, and assist with instruction and supportive services. Safal Partners is a national industry intermediary. We operate off the Department of Labor contract to help employers in every sector build a stronger, more skilled cyber and IT workforce. Our services on this particular contract, we provide that expert ongoing technical assistance. Our subject matter experts work with teams to launch and expand registered apprenticeship programs within these occupations. We provide an online, on-demand, industry-built training courses that align to multiple certifications and credentials that all of our partners can use as the related instruction component, and our resource is called Cybersecurity. We have direct one-time per apprentice incentive funding, which can be braided with other sources of funding, and also help identifying other state and local resources to support registered apprenticeship programs. When I spoke about the related instruction resource, we have a partnership with Cybersecurity, which provides that no-cost online industry-built credentially aligned training for registered apprentices. This resource could be used solely for the related instruction component, or could be used to supplement current courses, for example, at a college or university or a private training provider. When we talk about pre-apprenticeship, and then we talked about registered apprenticeship, this is one of the occupations that is being apprenticed throughout the United States. It is called computer support specialist. The way I search for that, if you kind of look to the right, you see on the top there, it says IT generalist. I actually went to apprenticeship.gov to figure out which occupation were already registered within the system. So apprenticeship.gov is the one-stop source to connect career seekers, employers, and education providers with apprenticeship resources. So through this occupation search, I highlighted the computer support specialist. I know it's a lot on this slide. When you click on that title, it provides you with an approved Appendix A at the occupation, for that occupation, which aligns with the on-the-job learning or competencies. And at times, they have an example of the related instruction outline an apprentice will have to master. The related instruction, again, can be sourced from one provider, like a community college, or it can be a combination of many different sources. Each program, as previously discussed, has a minimum requirements upon completing the registered apprenticeship program. With this particular occupation, the U.S. average wage is about $60,000 per year. And there are some resources on this particular page, and this will be shared out. So we talked about the pre-apprenticeship. We talk about registered apprenticeship. We ask how can individuals on this webinar or call, get involved? And your first question is, well, where are they? How do I find them? How do I even connect within our local area to figure out if we can provide a pipeline, and provide services to the people that we serve so they can have access and opportunity? So definitely connect with your workforce system. You can contact us at the Center of Excellence. There's Apprenticeship Finder on apprenticeship.gov, which finds throughout the United States, depending on which state you're located in. If you are a private sector entity, definitely align with your local workforce board and connect with a registration agency within your state. So either your state is considered a state apprenticeship agency, or it's an Office of Apprenticeship state. So I mentioned the Center of Excellence. So if you need help with the pre-apprenticeship or the registered apprenticeship, or how do I get started and what does all this mean? So our Center of Excellence is a great resource for you. So we provide no-cost TA, including monthly webinars, virtual office hours, individual coaching. So please definitely connect with us. If you don't know where to start, we can definitely help you with that coaching. Some other resources that I've listed here are from the Center of Excellence or from Jobs of the Future. The RA Academy on apprenticeship.gov is an amazing resource as well. And there's other ways of identifying partners. There is a little QR code here for the workforce guide to identifying pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship partners. Now, I know you have probably a lot of questions at this time, and Amber, I cannot see the chat. So are you able to see the chat?
I am, and if there's something,
Okay.
yeah, I can read those out as we go. Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic.
And also, Lindsay, are people able to unmute and speak, or should this only be done through the chat or the Q&A function?
Yeah, through the chat or Q&A. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, great. Okay, that said, I can see the chat, and I can also see the Q&A area here. So I will start with those. So everyone, if you can put your questions in the chat, that'd be a great place to put them. I see there's also some in the Q&A. They can be at either place. The chat might be easiest. So I'm going to start answering some of the questions, or we are in the Q&A, but please think about what questions you have related to adult education and access to registered apprenticeship. And I also would like to ask folks that are on here, not just what questions you have, which we're very interested in, but also what are you doing in your local area? You know, we were thinking a little bit as we started designing this presentation that you know, it's hard to know sometimes, you know, what has changed from year to year in adult education. A lot of people are excited about apprenticeship, excited about accessing apprenticeship for their students, but sometimes we don't hear about what folks are actually doing because these relationships can take a few years to build. So we're interested in also hearing how people are doing as they go. So let me just look here on the chat first for questions, and please post them in, and then I'll go to the Q&A. Just one moment here. Okay. So Peter asked, will there be any mention of the role of organized labor or labor management partnership? So we did mention them just a little bit briefly, but I can answer now, or Peter, if you've got specific questions that we can address. But one thing I want to note about the role of organized labor. So Angela said, talked about the fact that this model of registered apprenticeship is really something that you know, originated with labor unions, like you know, about 100 years ago in the United States. And these you know, these elements of registered apprenticeship that we talk about, these requirements, these are, you know, requirements at the federal level, also at the state level, that have been developed, you know, over the last century, and that really started with labor unions. Another thing to keep in mind is that some of the benefits of this model really are benefits that we see particularly in what we call joint registered apprenticeship programs. So joint means that they have the participation of a labor union, right? So they're joint with the labor union as opposed to non-joint, which is not with the labor union. And although registered apprenticeship programs are expanding in both union and non-union spaces, one thing we have seen that research has really shown that sometimes the best outcomes, particularly for marginalized groups, are within the joint programs. And so as you yourselves are looking in your communities for registered apprenticeship programs, it's important to keep in mind that, you know, that looking for, in particularly for those with union participation can be valuable. Unions often bring their own wraparound supports for the students. They, you know, have the funding to be able to, you know, to provide additional individualized supports that sometimes may be lacking in other programs. So that's something to keep in mind with those programs. What other specific questions do we have? as people are typing them in, I'll note also that Michael Weaver, you've got several questions that are really a little more specific to, New York State, or for, requirements for individual states, whatever state you're in. I'm assuming it's New York City. So I think the best, this is actually a little bit instructive, I think, for all of us, because it helps us, see that so much of this is going to be dependent on the local and the state context. So, there isn't like one set of interviewing questions for registered apprenticeship programs. There's not one set of regulations. They vary by state and local area. So it's important to reach out to the program itself and find some of that information out. And, in the past, I've just cold called unions and registered apprenticeship programs, and, set up a meeting and had a conversation and saw, tried to see, where might there be some possibility of partnership going on here. What other questions are there? I'm not seeing too many others yet, or comments. Could someone share a little bit about what they're doing in their local areas to access apprenticeship for their students? And Angela, I will, if we have any questions, I will read them out loud to you as well.
Thank you. Sorry, I cannot access them.
Let's see if I see one here. I think one might be coming. We're just going to give it a second here. We also had someone also mention apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs in jails and prisons, which I think is an interesting possibility. While we're waiting for any additional questions, Angela, you talked a little bit about your own experience with registered apprenticeship in your context, which I think might be interesting for people to understand that even though we've been talking primarily for adult educators, primarily about pre-apprenticeship and getting students registered, or ready to access apprenticeship, other adult education programs are blending funding and actually becoming sponsors, I believe, of apprenticeship. Could you say a little bit about that?
That's correct. Well, first I want to comment on registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship for incarcerated individuals. We're working with an organization, Unlock Labs, where they are providing education to individuals who are incarcerated, and once they are released, they are getting employed and continuing on in that registered apprenticeship model. So everyone is trying to think outside of the box. Is how do we educate? How do we provide access? What does that look like? Who needs to be at the table to really accomplish these things? So you spoke of having, pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship. I have administered registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship in specifically also in the healthcare sector. So I know that extremely well. We ran a CNA apprenticeship for many years and felt that our completion rates were not exactly where we wanted them to be, and felt that creating a pre-apprenticeship to really prepare the individual academically and making sure that they had all the supports necessary. So when they entered that registered apprenticeship on day one, it enhanced their success. So all of the issues that our apprentices or challenges that they would encounter, that maybe we could deal with all of those things and make sure that we prepare everyone before they started employment. We are also able to braid different sources of funding. So if you're needing funding for a registered apprenticeship, we actually engaged with the workforce system. The workforce system is supporting the registered apprenticeship program, that related instruction component, through an ITA. So we basically do reverse referral to that workforce system and have that partnership for individuals to qualify for WIOA funding to cover the cost of the program. We also have worked with National Industry Intermediaries in the healthcare space. They at the time had sources of funding to help support the registered apprenticeship program. From the pre-apprenticeship component, there is funding that has been awarded and a lot of Department of Labor of investments in pre-apprenticeship and also registered apprenticeship. You have ABA Round 1 grantees and ABA Apprenticeship Building America Round 2 grantees that are really concentrating in this pre-apprenticeship space. So we've partnered with one ABA Round 1 grantee, and they're actually funding our pre-apprenticeship program. That pre-apprenticeship program lasts a month. It covers the cost of the instructors, and we actually work keys test. I don't know if every state uses that, but we actually use work keys to assess the individuals. So it covers all of our costs in that pre-apprenticeship component, which directly leads into that registered apprenticeship.
Thanks, Angela. And we are getting a couple of questions rolling in now, I think, based on the things you're saying. And one of the questions that we had, one of the first ones was this, and I think that you and I might both have a little bit to say about it. So the question is from Sarah Michaels, and it's, what size is a typical cohort? And what percentage of those who start typically complete? And I don't know if we can say what size a typical cohort of registered apprenticeship programs or pre-apprenticeship programs are.
I think I can actually talk to that, because when you're running a program, when you're running a program, everything is driven off cost.
Right.
So what is the cost of the program? Where's my break even? Working in the public sector, and for public education, especially in adult education, we have to break even. It's not to make money, but how do we cover those costs? What does that structure look like? How many, of pre-apprentices do we need to onboard to cover cost? What does that look like? And with our specific program, let's say it's a CNA program, there are certain requirements that your class size can only be so large per instructor. So you might have other, state requirements, especially in the healthcare, that, pertaining to class size. So with our pre-apprenticeship, we basically recruit in, and if you're looking at completion rates and success rates within our CNA, well, it's actually called the Healthcare Stars Pre-Apprenticeship Program. But with that pre-apprenticeship program, we enter, and I think the success rate right now is 90-something%. I don't remember off the top of my head, that successfully transition into this registered apprenticeship program. And I think doing it for so long, I wanted to ensure that we had a pre-apprenticeship that made sense, that really prepared the individuals. And then you have to involve all of the employers, especially in that pre-apprenticeship, because they eventually need to get hired. So how are you engaging them in that pre-apprenticeship model, either with mock interviews, or it's really taking a look at what are the occupation, who are your partners, and how do I take an individual through this pre-apprenticeship model and get them everything that they need to successfully transition and get hired by that particular employer or group of employers.
Can I note, thank you. And can I note also that, one thing to kind of add to this is that, Angela and I are in different types of contexts. So if I understand correctly, Angela, she's in a more of an urban area, right, where there might be larger groups of workers, right, and bigger programs. I'm in more of a rural state, and most of our programs are rural programs. So only thing I want to add to what Angela said, because that was great information, is that it's important to note that sometimes the cohort can be quite small. Like with the South Carolina example I mentioned earlier, I don't know about the size of their programs, but I'll say that one thing to keep in mind is that, in a given adult education program, you may only have a few students who are interested in accessing that particular registered apprenticeship program, right? Or a career cluster. And so you've got to think about how can you be creative and develop a pre-apprenticeship IET that might, provide access into a number of different registered apprenticeship programs. Or can you just simply run it with a small cohort with hoping that, over time, you'll be able to grow that when word of mouth and other things spread about the good outcomes that people have. And the second thing I'll note about this really quickly, we've got some more questions here now, is that registered apprenticeship programs still, even the union ones, have sometimes pretty high attrition rates. That is a reality about a registered apprenticeship typically across the country. And the things that can address that are these wraparound supports that we mentioned earlier. So to the extent that you can build in support for your students in the pre-apprenticeship and even as they transition into the registered apprenticeship program, to the extent that you're able to do that with in different ways, probably the more successful students will be. And let me look down here, and this is great. We're getting some comments of people's personal experience. We just have a few minutes left here, but Douglas says that we've got a case manager devoted full time to helping inmates in our pre-release programs to get jobs for work experience. This is great because they end up with resumes too, right? So talking about pre-apprenticeship in the correctional context can be an excellent way to benefit, the students themselves, the employers, because they get these, folks who are trained and ready to work, and of course society, because adult education services are correlated with reduced recidivism right across the country. And then let me look down here. Great. So Michael, it looks like you've got some very specific questions. So I'm going to share your email address with Angela, or at the end here, you're going to get a slide with our contact information. You can contact us and we can help maybe provide, a little additional information. So Michael, if you wouldn't mind emailing us directly, because you've got some specific questions, we might be able to help you a little better. As I see, you've got several questions. Let's see here. Any other questions that I see? I just want to look through real quick. Anyone have any other questions that are general? One, Evelyn says that IET for CNA and phlebotomy is very important and favorable in my area. And I would just note that that's common in New Mexico too, and I think around the country, those are good IET programs to build. One thing I want to note that I've been saying a lot recently, that I think it's for us as adult educators to consider is, and this is nothing against CNA and phlebotomy programs, but it's important that we keep in mind what the end goal is for the students, what they identify as the end goal. Certified nursing assistant or CNA programs are great. There are a lot of them out there. And we often think about CNA as a first step into really good healthcare careers, right? There's a ladder that exists there. But research in the last few years has found that even though a lot of WIOA-funded programs have gotten people into CNA programs, they often don't access the additional stages of that ladder. So it's really incumbent upon us as we're designing, as we're developing relationships, as we're creating those MOUs, to make sure that our students know what pathways exist, know how to access them, and have the supports to be able to do it, because it's not enough, to be completely honest, into getting them into CNA programs often, which sometimes don't have really the pay scale we're looking for family sustaining wages. It's a great entry point, but what can we do to help students continue to move along that pathway? I think that's important things for adult educators to consider and their employer partners. I know we have.
And Amber, I just want to add to that.
Yes, please.
So in that pre-apprenticeship model, also go over that career exploration. First off, is this the career that I'm wanting? And what is that progression? They need to see that. Like you're saying, for example, a CNA program. That's getting entry into this career pathway and understanding where you can go, CNA to RN or CNA to occupational therapist or respiratory therapist. And a lot of the times these employer partners have tuition reimbursement or loan forgiveness. So if the issue is the cost of that education, it is an opportunity for these particular individuals to tap into the company benefits, because these companies also want them to grow in the industry. So I think it's educating them in that pre-apprenticeship or even during the registered apprenticeship is, what are the options? What are the opportunities? And then it's really, how do you gain access to it? But it's up to that individual to move forward in that career pathway.
Thank you. Well, listen, everyone, we're at time. So I think we want to thank everyone for being here. This has been really a great opportunity and an honor to be able to present here. Both of our contact information is here. And I would like to say that I particularly would love to hear, there's been some really great examples and experiences popping in. And I would really like to hear from some adult education programs that are you know, engaging with RA in a number of different ways. And I'd like to know it from my own for next time to be able to spotlight some of your excellent programs as well, to get some of this information out there. So thank you, everyone, from me.
Thank you.